So thank you so much for doing this interview. And how's everything at Harvard going so far?
Great, great. Two more
Excellent.
days and school starts.
2 more days.
First day of classes.
And then basically just be all like, hey, what's up, children? Daddy's here to claim that 4 point.
I guess.
Basically, stuff
Yeah.
of that nature. Anyway, so it's great to see you. And my gosh, like, who would have thought that we would actually be here long after your mom once sent me that fateful message one day? So here you are. You're at Harvard right now. And without further ado, so then let's go right ahead and start off this interview. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pathways to Excellence. We have here with us an incredible guest, Mr. Jarell Cheong undergraduate at Harvard University, one of the amazing students of our generation. So, congratulations on your achievements so far, Jarell, and thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me.
Yeah, yeah. Happy to talk about things here.
Cool. All right, cool. Hey, incidentally, speaking of interviews, I did watch another interview a while ago, and basically, I have a little surprise for you. Does this seem familiar to you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Bought that
Oh,
book a long time ago.
bought that book a
Maybe
long time ago.
I referred you to it or something. But yeah, that was a pretty pivotal book
A
in my
pretty
early
pivotal book.
childhood education. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it does say I will teach you to be rich. And of course, that is going to be something that we'll talk a little bit about later on in the course of this interview. But of course, just to kind of transition us back to the focus of today's conversation. So, Pathways to Excellence, to those of you who are joining us for the very first time, is a series that focuses on talking about education and showcasing talent wherever it may reside. Education is something that's incredibly important to me, and it's always great to be able to showcase, I think, incredible examples, inspirations to the world out there. And we have one such inspiration right in front of us. So without further ado, so then, Jarell, if you could maybe share with me, so how do you feel that life has been ever since, I guess, you've gone to Harvard? How do you feel that your life has changed in some ways?
I don't know. I just feel like I've gotten a lot busier. Like before, I used to have a lot more free time. And
Mm,
like if I were working the whole day, I would be like, I haven't spent enough time like not working today. And it will feel odd. But
yeah.
like ever since I came here, like I think like full day of work is like sort of like the norm where you just like wake up, you go to classes, you work, 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 work. You kind of have food just to sustain yourself, but you work all the way until night and you're like, oh, I guess it's time to sleep. Like that would be like the usual day. And a day where you get time to actually relax and do what you want, like that is like strange, like you feel like you're not doing enough.
Well, it has been said, to those who can work, more work shall be given.
Yeah,
But
I
you're
guess.
obviously very good at what you do. I mean, considering that you have a literal 4.0 GPA, despite taking the hardest classes that are available to you, including the legendary Math 55 and various other things of that nature, which we'll, of course, explore during the course of this conversation. But all right, let's start a little bit earlier, though. So, you are originally from Malaysia, right? So maybe can you share a little bit about how growing up in Malaysia influenced, I guess, your early life, like maybe in terms of like your current motivation or things of that nature right there? Because the level of motivation that it must have taken to get to Harvard is probably not something that most people would have encountered.
Yeah, I guess Malaysia does have a certain culture towards that direction, perhaps less strongly than like say other countries like Singapore or like Korea or China, but I feel like there is a certain expectation that students are supposed to do well in school and to get into a good university and sort of like take things from there. And yeah, I guess like any other student in Malaysia, I felt that sort of expectation, like that sort of like plan. And I think I just naturally gravitated towards just like doing well at school and like
Mm,
learning more and trying my best to get into a good university. And I think
I see.
that's, I guess, the biggest way like Malaysia is correlated to what I've done so far.
Well, of course, there are multiple different Malaysias though, Jay. I mean, like it depends also on your family, like the kinds of influences that you've had out there. I mean, would you say that your mom, Miss Tan, essentially had a very strong influence upon your, I guess, like valuation of education, like your inclination, or do you feel like it was just more of like something else out there? Like, yeah, if you could share.
Yeah, I guess they are like amazing role models for one. Like both of my parents, like they like work very hard themselves to get into like the medicine program at like Malaya University back in the day in like the 1980s and 90s, which according to them is a lot harder than it is right now.
Oh, I thought you were
And
gonna say it's harder than Harvard.
oh yeah, they do say that sometimes too. Yeah, like after hearing like my experiences here. And yeah, so like they're always motivating like me and my other siblings to work very hard and
Mm-mm.
to try our best at everything we do. So yeah, that's definitely been a very key point. But I think besides that, I've also been like growing in terms of my own self-motivation over the years. Like I
Mm.
didn't care as much about studying and doing well and all that until around like 16 or 17. Maybe I just grew up or something. But like yeah, I started to take things more seriously. I can't pin down why though. Like I
Mm.
think it's just like a natural part of like growing up and
I
thinking
see.
more long term, maybe.
I see. Cool.
Yeah, or maybe it's just me losing my like childlike, happy, playful spirit and slowly transitioning into the dead inside adult.
You're
I
playing in
currently
the
am.
world of numbers and homomorphisms
Yeah,
now, so that's a different type of
maybe.
playing right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot more
Well,
different, but yes.
sure. Well, I guess that being said, though, there were so many different possible routes, I guess, to sway your interests. And of course, everybody has a different sense of how to build a future. But what led you to decide to build a future in math in particular? And do you have a sense of what could have led towards that interest and in turn towards taking multiple highly advanced math courses? You took like math 55, right, if I'm not wrong, and then like you just went on and you just like spam like the hardest possible classes in Harvard.
Oh yeah, I guess like initially when I was younger, when I wanted to decide what to study at university, like process of elimination helped a lot. So I reflected a lot about what I didn't want to study. For example, like I didn't really like writing essays growing up. Like comparing that towards like solving like technical problems, I prefer like solving technical problems over writing essays. Like essays do have like a sort of like unfair vibe to them where it's like what
Fair
vibe
vibe.
does the grader feel about your essay. There was this like element of subjectiveness I never really liked because it felt like a lot more out of my control. um I guess it does have its like perks and advantages. Even here at Harvard, like many things like are more achievable if you take the essay route and you do those type of like concentrations as they call here, which like the rest of the world calls like majors. But yeah, so like after eliminating essays, that eliminates like a lot of the potential things I could study, and then looking towards like the more STEM fields, and looking towards like science and all that. I realized in A level that I didn't really like lab work either. Like I wasn't
Mm.
like I was very like meticulous, and I did have a lot of attention to detail. And that I guess helped me a lot in lab components and like chemistry and whatnot. But like I didn't enjoy it. Like it wasn't like fun. It was stressful to get things right. And it's even more stressful when you break things. So yeah, none of those. Where like
That's
it
probably.
involves like using my hands to like build or like tweak things. Well, that's gonna go wrong, and that's what I thought. So like those two combinations of things actually like eliminated like a lot of things. So I guess
So
what's left, I chose math because it seems like the most accessible thing remaining, I guess. It's very easy to learn a lot of math online
mhm.
compared to some other subjects. And yeah, I
And
started learning it online for fun, and
I see.
I guess
And now here we are,
yeah.
multiple years later, with a perfect 4.0 GPA in the hardest classes at Harvard. Wow, just applause, man. Like just that's wow, from small beginnings. Anyway, so that being said, now do you feel that also living in Malaysia has influenced your worldview somewhat?
Could you elaborate on what you'd like that to mean?
Well, all right. Let's follow up on that a little bit later on. But for now, maybe I could maybe talk about some of the aspects of Malaysia that I've come to know that you've experienced. For example, you were part of the Malaysian national dance team. If you go on YouTube right now and you basically search Jarell Cheong, then you see Jarell and Ginny dancing at Blackpool right there. And I think that you have a YouTube channel that's like the 3Js or something of that nature.
Okay, yeah, like that channel was created after I left, so it's mostly my siblings and not me. So I don't know.
Okay, cool. All right. So maybe would you share a little bit about, well, how you eventually got to that stage of maybe dancing for Malaysia as well?
Yeah, like I think it was around like when I was 15 or 16. Somehow I came to know that like ballroom dancing is a thing that existed. And I think around that time I was already cognizant of like the fact that I would need many like good extracurriculars
Mm,
to do very well and like compete in a good way within like the college admissions process. Um I think Malaysians in general don't have a very good view usually about what it takes to get into a top school, and I guess my view at that point wasn't very complete or perfect. Like if I went back to in time knowing what I knew now, I would probably do something different. But back then I thought, let's try to learn ballroom dancing, let's try to represent the country and win a bunch of awards, and that's
mm.
how I'm gonna get into Harvard or some other school. Like replace Harvard with any top school. So
Wow. Mhm.
yeah, that's what I thought at the time. And I was like, well, I'm reasonably smart, right? Like I can pick this up and do well. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, I did have a reasonable sense that the competition in Malaysia wasn't that high in the dancing field in particular.
Mm,
It's like a very new and blooming like area
mm,
of competition. So it's not like badminton, for example, where like
sure.
things
Mm,
have gotten like really, really competitive.
mm.
Um, and yeah, I wanted to give it a shot. And I was like, I'm rather indifferent towards like the different things I could do. And I was like, yeah, why don't I just try this and see how it goes?
That's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so of course yeah, like there's some element of planning right there, which is great. I mean, like multiple different worldviews. Because like a lot of people they have this immediate thought that like you must find the thing that you're passionate about in order to kind of like proceed right there. But for you it's just kind of like, oh, that was this thing right here. I could do it, so I decided to do it. It's more of that right there.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Cool, 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 cool. I mean, so even like during those years when you were like dancing right there, I mean, like, did you feel like special kind of like inclination towards dancing? That I guess wasn't really present in any other activity because it must have taken up a lot of your time, right? So, I mean, you had like trainings. I recall basically where you would like just go over to, I guess, like the dance hall, then you have to coordinate with people, and then you have to literally fly over to different venues. You were at Blackpool one time, and I recall like yeah, like just multiple flights, like even during the time when essentially we were having sessions together and various other things of that nature. So I mean, yeah, like did you feel like a special passion towards dancing or anything else of that nature?
Yeah, I definitely did. Like, dancing I feel felt very enjoyable, but mostly it's because I did it a lot.
Ah, I
Um,
see.
and the reason I did it a lot and I really went full commitment into it, and that resulted in like, all the practices, all the trainings, all the flying around, all the competitions,
Oh yeah.
is yeah, I just like at that point, like my college application framework was like find a spike or something like that. I think that was the
Mm.
meta around then. Like find something you're really good at and like
I like how you're
define
saying meta right there.
you
It's like game.
as your application.
Mm.
Like yeah, so like you want like the admissions officer to like associate you with some activity that could bring like diversity to a class or something. So yeah, with that in mind, like I really went like seriously and gave it my all within that sport.
Mm.
And I yeah, like the enjoyment grew out of that, I
I
guess. Like
see. Okay. Cool, 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 cool.
yeah.
Well, all right, then that kind of helps us to transition, I guess, into the next question I'd like to ask you right here, which is, I guess, about your personal philosophy of life, which kind of harkens back to that question I was asking you a little bit earlier on. But yeah, so do you have a personal, I guess, like philosophy of life? I mean, like, I've heard like a couple of things right there, like meta, for example, or like strategy or various other things of that nature, which are kind of like almost showcasing what seems to be like a very gamified, I guess, like strategy to kind of like move forward right there. I'm not sure if that actually has to do with like your philosophy per se, but I recall something that you told me once, right? In relation to education. Basically, like, do you recall? Like, it was like basically one afternoon after we had, I think, like a math session or something of that nature. And then you basically told me about the process
Okay.
parents. Yeah, it's something like this. So, like, parents face, this is what you said, parents face a challenge when educating their children. So you have to imagine that basically you have like a progress bar for knowledge right here, and you have a progress bar for stress. So then basically like your aim is to basically maximize the knowledge while minimizing the stress. Do you remember that? You told me that.
Actually, like I still believe that. Yeah. So I can't believe that I said that at one point of time.
You did.
Uh yeah.
You 100% did say that. So yeah, I mean, like, gamified for sure. But anyway, yeah. So would you say that you have a personal philosophy of life, given your diverse background and also your interests?
Well, that philosophy has definitely changed a lot over the years. I feel like in recent years, like humans in general have learned a lot more about what it means to be alive, what it means to be living, what it means to learn, and like reflecting from those lessons. And by lessons, I mean like recent advances in machine learning and neural networks and all that. Like I feel like everything at the end of the day is an optimization problem, right? Like you want something and then you figure out what you do like that is like optimal to achieve it.
Okay.
And I guess within that grand scheme of things where like we're humans and we're trying to optimize, I think it's the really important issue of alignment. Like we should feel very strongly and reflect a lot about what it is we actually want to optimize,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like blindly diving in, right? So it's a lot of reflecting about what is actually important to us and only understanding that, like proceeding with the optimization.
I
Yeah,
see.
like a lot of people like optimize for something and then they realize later on down in life like this is not what they wanted, and that makes them sad. And so it's very important to like reflect and think about what it is you want to optimize and then like proceeding with the optimization, I guess. So that like in general is like how I've been approaching life, like
Mm.
thinking about what I really want and then like figuring out what I need to do to work towards it.
Oh
It
yeah.
doesn't mean I'm always successful, right? Like if you look at the neural network, sometimes the training goes well, sometimes it gets stuck in like local minima, sometimes it explodes out. Like if you I'm making like stochastic gradient descent references here. But
Yeah, I know
yeah,
what you mean.
you just have
Okay.
to keep like tuning things and eventually you'll get there, is what I think.
Right. So basically, spend time while identifying the things that actually matter to you, and then from there, then go hard or go home. That sort of thing, right there.
Yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess like sometimes even when you do have a direct goal, it is not something you can directly optimize. And then a lot of people choose to optimize like a secondary goal, like an auxiliary goal that like should lead to the optimization of their original goal.
Ooh,
Um
side quest,
for,
side quest.
yeah, like for example, like a lot of people want to be happy in life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
most people would agree that happiness is an important thing in life. But like when it comes down to like what they actually do in their day to day, they say like I want more money, right? Like because they feel like having more money will be, yeah, like be an auxiliary goal that will imply happiness. But like sometimes that's like not true, right? Like don't quote me on this, but there are definitely studies that show that like more money doesn't necessarily lead to more happiness. And so sometimes it's important to recognize, like when the loss function is different from the true objective function, say, and when you should like act on that difference. That's another important thing for me as well.
Sure. Okay. Well, that being said, then maybe in terms of like optimizations, now I guess like what would you say are some of the things that you would be optimizing for at least at this stage of your life? I mean, like the very fact that you have a 4.0 GPA right there at Harvard, it suggests that basically you're optimizing for that. But yeah, maybe can you share a little bit about that right there? Do you feel that it's true that you're optimizing for that grade? Or maybe can you also share about like some of the other things that you're optimizing for at this point in time as well?
Well, yeah, I feel like ultimately I am optimizing for long-term happiness in
Mm-hmm.
life.
Long-term
Um,
happiness, that's good. Yeah,
that is very important to
very
me. And
important.
that means putting my relationships with the people I care about more important than like
Mm,
my potential career or money making goals.
mm,
Because
wow.
personally, I feel like that's a very important thing for me. And I guess all the sub goals like should sort of lead to that, or at least I've convinced myself that they do.
Mm,
So I think the 4.0 thing is just um optimizing for like not having like any regret, right? Like I believe like a 4.0 or like doing well in college in general is something you can only do now, right?
mm,
Uh, like so if you get it wrong now, there's no way to go back and fix it.
mm,
A lot of people start off right at the bat by like not caring about it, which is another strategy.
mm,
But I feel like since I cared about it at the very start, and I
mm,
have cared about it for like a year now, like it makes more sense to like go through with this than to like
mm,
pivot and like suddenly like not care about it and focus on
mm,
other things. But
mm,
I would say that like having a 4.0 or like doing really well at school is not like a prerequisite to happiness in life.
mm.
It's just like how you want to go about things.
I
And
see. Mm,
and personally that's the decision I've made to like do well and make that like my most important thing these 4 years.
I
And I
see.
think as a
Mm,
result of that, I have sacrificed a lot.
mm.
I think there were many cases where I could have taken like a more useful course, potentially for some career I want to go into.
Can
And
you elaborate on like what you mean by that?
in what sense?
in a sense of like, can you maybe describe a situation where you did not take a class that would have been useful for your career, so to speak, in lieu of taking another that might have been essentially, I guess, helpful for facilitating either like getting a 4.0 or perhaps like self empowerment in a particular form of knowledge that you were interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, to get into that, I really need to get into like the realities of how like grades and things work
Mm-hmm.
at Harvard and like maybe even more broadly throughout other like top institutions in the US.
Okay, go for it.
But like I guess the first major point is that like not all departments are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are much easier to succeed in than others.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know why that's the case. I think it's very hard to make it like very fair and make it so that like it's easy to succeed in all of them. But
Mm-hmm.
usually I find a very strong correlation between like how it's a positive correlation between how useful a subject is for your potential money making ability
Mm-hmm.
to like how hard it is to like do well and get an A in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, the most competitive departments here at Harvard are like the computer science department,
Mm-hmm.
the economics department, and like usually departments where you can see like the graduates making a lot of money. Those are the ones with like um systems that make it a lot harder to succeed in. So that has been my observation.
Mm-hmm.
In contrast, I study pure mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
which is the branch of mathematics that is not useful to real life at all, at least not for the
uh,
next 50 years or so. So it doesn't mean it will forever not be useful. Like a lot of like weird, wacky branches of pure mathematics, like do end up like or turn out to be useful like 200 years from now in an
mm-hmm.
incredibly important way, but a totally unexpected way. There are many examples of this. So for example, like mathematicians have been studying like number theory for centuries, which is just like properties of whole numbers, like does this one divide that one, like which number is prime, and like weird and nonsensical questions that nobody saw like what like the need of that was at the time. And then like I think 500 years later or something, like we see that it's like an important like application in like cryptography and making sure that like messages get sent from point A to point B reliably without being intercepted. So like that suddenly became like a very important application of number theory.
Mm-hmm.
um and another example that's perhaps more recent is that like it's the branch called knot theory. So apparently, a subset of mathematicians are really concerned about classifying all the different types of knots. So by what I mean by a knot is like you take like a string and then you like wrap it around a certain way and then you close it back up,
Oh
and
gosh.
that is a knot, right? And
Memories from
basically,
scouts. Yeah, no, sorry, go
yeah,
on.
yeah, like all those types of knots, exactly. And the question is like, how many different knots are there? Where I'll define two knots to be the same if you can like tweak one knot without cutting it to make it exactly the same as the other.
Wow.
So this was like a hugely important but hugely useless question for like the last 400 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and recently, it turns out like if you know enough about knots and you know how to engineer them in like micro settings,
Mm-hmm.
you can make like a material that's like 100 times like stronger than Kevlar right now, or like you can find like the right protein configurations, and make chemotherapy treatments like far more useful than before. Again, I'm
Wow.
not providing citations from this, so like just take my word as it is. But yeah,
All right.
so
Cool.
it's things like that. But as a result, like in pure mathematics, like generally there aren't that good of a career prospect right after you graduate,
Mm-hmm.
because like for there to be good money making ability, you need to have like immediate like good utility in the market, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you need skills that like can contribute towards like something that's making money right now, and like pure mathematics is just not it. Look at the typical path of the strongest pure mathematics students, like grad school, i.e. learning more pure mathematics for a PhD. Yeah, like people just don't end up very rich out of that.
Okay, sure,
Okay, so this long like segue aside, I'm just saying I study pure mathematics, in which it is much easier to do well in than in some of the more like practical like departments. And I think that has made the biggest difference in why my grade is so good compared to like some one else who chooses to do some of these more difficult but useful subjects. There are definitely many other reasons why I have succeeded here, like like I work hard and all that, but I feel like fundamentally this has been the biggest difference. It
Huh.
is this like asymmetry in like department difficulty.
I
Uh,
see.
that
That's interesting. I mean, like, because you say that, but then like Math 55 and like some of the classes that you're taking are considered often to be like some of the most legendarily difficult classes at Harvard University. So that's interesting. I mean, do you have a thought on that?
Well, that is true. And there are two definitions of difficulty actually, right? So first is like how difficult is the material itself? Like if you learn it, like how much will you struggle with it relative to what you have learned before? And like as a result, how hard is it to like do the problems or questions assigned to you and to really engage and learn well from this material? So that is usually what people refer to as hardness. And in that respect, pure mathematics is an extremely difficult subject. So pure mathematics generally has the reputation of being very abstract and very hard to understand. Everything is defined from the ground up, different to what like you'd normally see or know. And it has a reputation of being very like inaccessible and only open to like people who have done like a ton of like competition math, for example. The barrier to access is seen as very high. And like Math 55 in particular, it's like assumes like you're like amazing at like proving theorems already and having that proof writing skill, and it jumps right into like even more abstract problems in math. So in that regard, yes, like Math 55 and other of these like math and graduate math classes I'm taking are like extremely hard conceptually, like material wise, but that does not like equal like hardness. Like when you define hardness as like how hard is it to like get an A in this class, the reality is that like in Math 55, 95 or more percent of the class gets an A. And this is just anecdotal, don't quote me on this again. And don't sue me if this knowledge is wrong, but like yeah, that's just what I've observed. Like it's a lot easier to get an A in classes in the math department in general. There are less like cutthroat like in-person exams where like the professor grades and like 5% or 10% of the class fails. Like if you hear about like the grade inflation myth at Harvard, it is definitely much more concentrated in like the departments where like like getting a career after that is like not so important.
I
So
see.
yeah,
Okay.
it's very difficult. Students spend a lot of time on the class, like 20 or more hours a week, easily, right? Doing the homeworks, engaging with the material, trying to even understand what's going on. So in that sense, like everyone puts in a lot of work, but like everyone is rewarded for it at the end.
I
Whereas the
see.
same is just not true in like some of the other departments here, where like more people like get worse grades for the same amount of work.
I
So
see. I
yeah.
mean, although there could also be some element of self-selection as well, right? I mean, like if you think about it, like for example, like you might essentially find pure math simpler because like you have an inclination towards essentially pure math. So then in that respect, then you could think of it as essentially, for example, well, a squirrel climbing a tree, or for example, a duck swimming in water, as opposed to, for example, a duck attempting to climb a tree while frantically flailing its wings around while attempting to push its webbed feet up with no opposable thumbs to grip upon the tree in the first place. So yeah, I mean, it could be also that I guess maybe the people, like, how do you I guess like consider that? Do you consider it to be likely that maybe the people who are in pure math just happen to be like the kinds of people who are, well, very inclined essentially towards math, and hence they do well, as opposed to, well, there's a systematic difference in the difficulty between the departments? Because like if you think about it, right, like if essentially the people who tend to stay within the department just have that particular sort of like inclination to do so, then they will naturally gravitate towards those classes, and in virtue of their strengths, then they would end up essentially doing well. So then they might not essentially end up going towards other classes. Like in your case, so then it would seem, I don't know if that's like essentially true the entire way, but it would seem that you have not taken classes in those other kinds of departments that you deem to be competitive. And so if you really wanted to be able to compare, then maybe it would make sense to have a person who has taken classes in both of those departments. So, I mean, like, do you see that essentially there are some cases that you can think of that correspond to this?
Oh yeah, if you definitely put it towards like representative samples, then yes, it is very obvious that like there is a inherent difference, a systematic difference between departments. Like I wouldn't say a different department is like easier or harder than the math department. And I
Mm,
wouldn't say that like the people who take classes in these other departments are doing so because they're dumber and couldn't do the math and therefore like now they're there. They're not like inherently like smarter or like dumber than like math students. I don't think that's like the reason, or even if it is a reason, it's like not the main like factor, or like
I see.
not a very strong factor at all. Like
I
I know
see.
a lot of people who take like math classes and like CS classes and statistics classes,
Mhm.
and they're the same person, so that's kept constant. And like I think it's just a lot harder to do well in these other departments is what I've seen.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, sure, sure. Well, then let's, I guess, think about your particular approach towards math and statistics then. I guess in your case, so how do you approach especially difficult math and statistics problems? And actually, would you give us maybe a sampling of the kinds of classes that you've taken so far? Maybe like share like a couple of like the classes that you, I guess, like have actually experienced at Harvard, perhaps, so that like we can have a sense of what we were working with.
Well, I can tell you my entire like academic journey, which is not too long. I can
Mm,
give you a sampling of it.
sure.
So,
Mm,
within like pure math itself, I've learned a lot of algebra. So that starts with group theory, moving on to linear algebra, representation theory. So like these words might not mean anything, but if you Google them, you'll find that they're like legitimate.
they're real
Um,
things. They're not fake.
they're real things. Yeah, I've also learned a lot of like analysis, so real analysis, complex analysis,
Mm,
functional analysis,
mhm,
measure theory, and
mm,
those sort of things. Um, and I've also like, and the field that I'm really like going towards is a field called algebraic geometry, which combines the algebra and the geometry. So it forms like a language in which you can use algebra to tackle geometric problems and geometry to tackle algebra problems. So that's like what I'm like most interested in and what I'm probably gonna like write my senior thesis on and all that.
I
So
see. Interesting.
but yeah, that's just the math department. And I've also taken a lot of statistics classes. So probability theory, graduate probability theory, which is just like the same things but more advanced. And like you have like a stronger mathematical like base there. Statistical inference, which is very interesting. It's very collaborative, and like
Mhm.
the secret is honestly like working more as a team than than what most people do. Yeah, it's the biggest reason why I still have a 4.0. It's because I trust and rely a lot on like a lot of other people. And
Mm.
yeah, it is more of like the work of like the people around me who have helped me a lot in so many ways than it is like my own
Mm.
ability.
Right, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think that we can all identify with that. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, then you go together in many. Well, I guess, okay, so I kind of understand the journey that you've had so far. But I guess, like, when it comes to approaching these math classes that you've been taking, I guess, like, is there a strategy that you adopt towards doing well?
Yeah, so basically like I mentioned before, it's very collaborative. So like in most classes, all of my grade will come down to like, can I do like these 10 homework sets that get assigned to me once per week throughout the semester?
Mm-hmm.
And the problems in the homework will be very difficult, right? So they will push you to the limits of your understanding of the material that's being taught.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes even more so. Like sometimes doing well in the homework requires an even greater imaginative insight that isn't really talked about in the lectures or in the book.
Mm. I see. Okay, got you. So then there is, I guess, like a lot of like collaboration for sure. But I guess like in terms of like being able to, I guess like quote unquote push yourself to the limits of understanding. I mean, like I guess are there certain things that you do, like certain tools that you use? You have a particular way of thinking about, I guess, extremely difficult and often new and abstract concepts that helps you to be able to do well in the classes that you're taking?
Yeah, a lot of math is like learning new definitions. Like I would almost equate it to like learning a new language where
Mm,
you have to learn a lot of like new words, recognize what they are and like understand what they mean. And then on top of that, learn like what's the appropriate like usage of these words within like a certain sentence or context. And so yeah, in math you learn a lot of like weird objects that you will use throughout like the next few years. Like you learn what a group is,
mm,
you learn what like a ring is,
mm.
and it's not like
I
the
see.
ring you think about.
Oh,
Yeah,
if you like it, then you gotta put a ring on it.
yeah, not that ring.
Not that
So
ring. Okay, I believe that there was also like a hairy ball. No, I'm sorry. Cut. uh, okay.
yes, and that like Harry Ball theorem is a theorem about like vector fields, right? It is
Okay.
like used when you like scrape the ball, like not all of the hairs will go down or
Okay.
something.
Okay.
It's
No, it's a
a
real thing.
system
Yes.
invariance. Yeah.
Okay. Amazing.
Like
Cool.
yeah, so a lot of different definitions.
Okay, cool. So you have to, I guess, learn the definitions and then begin to use the math that you learn about pretty much the same way that you would use language. I guess, like, do you find that there are certain ways in which you've come to optimize learning how to use those definitions within like mathematical fluency? Or do you feel that it's just more something that's like holistic and developed over, I guess, like your experience and your time actually with doing mathematics? I do teach English, and I do know for sure that like just because you teach someone the definitions of English words, that doesn't actually mean that they will be able to understand how to use them in context. So that's just something to consider, I guess, along the way. So how do you, well, utilize definitions with fluency, and is there a strategy that you use in order to do that?
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing you would do if you were like learning a language, right? Like what's the best way to learn a new language from scratch? It's to speak with the locals, right? It's like
Mm.
if you want to learn French, you just like buy a one-way ticket to Paris and just
Ah,
live there for like 6 months and you'll just like automatically learn French, right? Like that's the best way to do it. And just like in math, like the best way to like learn all these new words, learn like how they're used, is to just like regularly talk to like people who are like very fluent in them already. And something I do at this school that like a lot more frequently than other people is like talk to professors. I feel like that's one of the best ways to make the most out of this education. It is very rare that you can just like walk into a professor's office uninvited and start chatting to him about random math topics. That is one of the most underappreciated aspects of this school. And it's something I do a lot. Like I meet with each of the instructors of my classes like once a week just to talk about math problems. And
Oh, cool, cool, cool. Now, that being said, so I guess maybe would you share a little bit about, well, any other habits or strategies that you've, I guess, like implemented that have helped you to be successful in this journey or process of learning math at Harvard?
so like it's a combination of like being very efficient at my work. So one approach that I take towards math is like a problems-based approach first, which means that like I prioritize like doing my homework problems very, very fast, even though I don't really understand what's going on yet. So like to uncover what like I'm missing, like I'll try to do this problem, and then that will tell me and sort of like enlighten me on like what I don't know or what I know not so good so far. Like the times where I've learned the most from problems is when I've like actually just like started them and without knowing what I know, and then just work on it from there. Like I know a lot of other students here who would like make sure they know like 100% of what's going on, take like beautiful notes, and like before they start the homework they would like make sure they feel like they understand like what's happening. And usually that just means that they start the homework late, and then they finish late, and then it's very stressful, and then they have to pull multiple all-nighters. So like I've never like gone a single day without sleep here. I work very hard during the day, but I make sure it stays to like the daytime. And that is definitely not true with a lot of other students here.
Mm,
And I guess it's just like being efficient and like managing my time well, I guess.
I
So
see.
yeah,
So,
problem-based approach first, and also like not um not hesitating to get help. That's something that I find very important as well. If I'm really stuck on something, I wouldn't get stuck on it but for like too long. Like more than 20 minutes, I feel like it's unproductive, and I'll ask someone for help. That someone could be someone who knows the material, it could be the professor, the teaching staff, my friends. But yeah, just like getting towards that stage of talking to people about it as fast as possible is important.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, incredible. So yeah, that one, well, by the way, like that was absolutely on point. So then would you say, I guess, like that is one of the key tenets of efficiency, essentially being able to seek for help like immediately, or are there some other elements of like what you deem as efficiency?
Well, there are more ways to be efficient, definitely, but I think it depends on like what aspects of that you can actually keep up within your system, right? There are definitely more things I can do to be more efficient, but like,
Mm,
can I actually be efficient at like making sure I do all of those things, right?
mm,
And I think, for me, like my current approach of like going at the problems first and like asking
mm,
for help and constantly talking to people about it,
mm,
that has been the approach that works best for me, and
for
it's
sure.
it's it's efficient enough, right?
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess things that I didn't mention but are like implied within this strategy is like sometimes I'm not the best like listener in class. I definitely don't pay like 100% full attention to every single class I go to. Sometimes like yeah, like lectures to me are like inefficient, and I will like skip them if I feel like I'm not actually like very productive here. Of course, some of the like teachers here are like absolutely phenomenal, like the best teaching I've had in my life. And for those classes in particular, I will like go and pay full attention and like take notes and whatnot. But I feel like you have 4 classes or 5 or 6 each semester. Most of them will have like subpar
Mm,
teaching because the people teaching are like, you know, world-renowned academics and not world-renowned teachers. They focus on their research and
mm,
sometimes their teaching suffers for it. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and I think it's important to just realize, well, I have a textbook. I can learn by reading the textbook. And if I have questions, I can ask them in person during like their designated office hours. So why am I actually at this lecture? Sometimes it's important to just
I
recognize that.
see. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is inspirational though. Like kind of going first into the problem, not knowing everything that you want. It's almost as if like this entire process of being like super efficient right there, it just requires you to just dive into the unknown rather than, for example, like developing a sense of certainty and then like proceeding from there. And it's almost as if like that's kind of like affirmed, and certainly it has been validated by the fact that you are essentially at the 4.0 level rather than like just like pulling all-nighters to develop that sense of understanding, because there is a difference between, for example, actually understanding something and having the feeling that you understand something, isn't there?
Yeah, something I've learned a lot this summer is that like true learning happens when you are in a state of distress.
Mm-hmm.
When you're struggling with something. That's when like you actually learn that thing. And however, humans subconsciously gravitate towards the path of least resistance. And so we prefer to learn things in a way that is like easiest to us.
Mm-hmm.
But in truth, that is like not the most efficient way to learn. So if there's like meta advice on like how to learn efficiently, it's that find the way to learn that makes you struggle the most, right? So an easy example and like something I've been doing a lot this semester or like this summer, I should say, is like learning like how to code, learning new like programming paradigms, new technologies. Like when you're learning like a new framework like PyTorch, if you know what that is, the easy thing to do would be to like read a book about it, go watch a YouTube video about it, and like those are like very easy things to do, and you feel like you're learning some things, but in truth, you're just actually just having an easy time.
I see. Yeah.
Whereas like the best way to learn is to just like dive right in, right? Like I am going to build this thing that I think is
Yeah.
really cool and really important. Oh no, I don't know how to build this. Well, let's figure it out. And then you
Well,
just go to the documentation. And like when you don't know something and you actually need it, like and you will find it like somewhere, like Google or whatnot. And when you do find it, you remember it more, right? Because like this, you
yeah,
struggle so much to find this. Like
for sure.
this is
Yeah.
more
I,
that
I
way.
feel like you definitely wouldn't be able to help Lek Heng if you was just casually watching YouTube videos about, what was it again? Like manifolds. Can you watch a YouTube video about manifolds? I don't know. Like, is that a three blue, one
You
brown thing?
can.
You
You
can?
you can
Okay.
actually, but they're like whole like differential topology like courses online. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, the best way to learn math is to work with problems. The best way to learn like programming languages or like technologies is to use them to build things with them and then realize what you don't know there. And the same
Mm.
can be true for like a lot of other things, right? Like you learn how to like drive by actually driving and not watching YouTube videos of people driving. I guess that's like the case. But yeah, like
Absolutely.
within like academia and learning, there's
Mhm.
this sort of like reading as a way to do it. But yeah.
So I guess now you've been through the Malaysian education system. Like you started, I think, at like SMK, like Sri Bintang Utara, if I'm not wrong. And then later on, then you went on to, if I'm not wrong, so Sunway College, where now they have a little poster of you just casually hanging out right there. And then
Yeah, it's there.
it's still there. Okay, cool. So then now, how do you feel, I guess, the education system, I guess, like in Malaysia could be improved, I guess, like based on like some of the things that you've experienced like in the US, because it's a very vibrant educational ecosystem, very different perhaps like from what you experienced in Malaysia, I suppose.
Yeah, just a lot more like hmm, I feel like a lot more emphasis on like collaboration needs to be introduced into our current like exam-based education system.
Mm,
So like in Malaysia, it is very much every person for themselves. And we see like doing well in exams as a good litmus test for whether someone has actually understood the material. Where
mm,
I feel it's a lot better to like, encourage people to like work in things and like build and tackle problems that like they're passionate about, right? And to do that right is very, very difficult, but I think it is an ideal worth striving for. So a lot more emphasis on projects, on like groups tackling problems, on like
mm,
yeah, just
right.
like
Mm,
people in the class like thinking together and learning how to work together towards
mm,
like um understanding the material that's being taught like together.
sure.
So some other
Mm,
countries I think do this very well. Yeah,
for
so
sure.
Malaysia is not one of them. And
I
that
see.
that type of thing is very
Yeah, yeah.
important in my view.
Mm. I would add a caveat to that, maybe that in order for you to succeed well in a group, like basically everyone in the group needs to actually be working towards that common goal. And of course, maybe you might say that, like, in Harvard, it might be a little bit easier if everybody is kind of like aligned towards that same goal and moving forward. But I do think that Malaysia, in some ways, the culture needs to be such that, there is a common striving towards excellence rather than, I guess, just pursuing individual ego or, like slacking. Because, if you're in a group situation and basically people slack on the group project, then it's not going to work out. So,
Yeah.
mm, all right, cool. Okay, then. So now, in the meantime, so as you progress with your time at Harvard, I guess, like, do you have any specific aspirations or goals for your future in the days ahead? I mean, like,
Um, y- no, none of that. I
oh,
I feel like through my time here, I've gained a very strong foundational understanding of mathematics and statistics. And I feel like it would be a waste if I did not use this to sort of effect a meaningful like change in like something that I'm interested in, right? So I
mm,
feel like I've learned a lot of this theory and I sort of want to dabble in like ways I can use this more.
mm,
It's an easy way to put it. So I think like there are many like possible application fields I've been considering.
mm,
So like finance is one of them.
mm,
There's a lot of statistics and like figuring out which stocks to pick and all that. Um, but yeah, like the economic conditions don't look too good for that right now. So I'm not sure how that will work out. Um, yeah, I guess other than that, there's like a lot of like emphasis these days and research about like data in general and how more better and more efficiently use the data that we're collecting to our advantage.
mm.
So that's something I'm curious to get into as well.
Okay. All right, cool. So then I guess as you've spent, I guess, a lot more time with math recently, do you find that like you still make time for like some of your other interests, like for example, dance or like anything else out there of that nature? I think that you were taking a yoga class at some point, so then maybe if you could share about like, I guess. Oh, I see that right there. Okay, namaste, friend. Namaste. All right. So yeah, so I guess, do you have like some kinds of like interests like outside of math, even as you've, been in this environment? Because like Harvard is an incredible place, is it not? Like a place where you could technically learn everything that you want to learn. Basically, incredible place, is it not? Like a place where you could technically learn everything that you want to learn. Basically, in the world, minus engineering. Wait, no, actually no, there is a John Paulson.
There is
There's a
very
Paulson School of Engineering, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, so how do you, I guess, pursue like I guess interests outside of math? I guess like at this point.
I have very few interests outside of math. A lot of it is like very math adjacent. So I'm very into learning about like machine learning, data science, like both from a practical and theoretical perspective. And
Mm.
so like I will like be involved in like that sort of space and learn more about what's happening recently. There's
Artificial
a lot of like,
intelligence.
yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff going on like as each day goes by. Partly driven by like the toxic like research culture in the field. Um and yeah, so like something I really like to do is to keep up with what's happening there. Other than that, yeah, I like to run, I like to do yoga, I like to do a lot of these like recreational things on and off. But
Mm.
mostly has been work. Like I mentioned at the start, like the normal day is a day where I do all work and nothing else.
Mm.
And that's the sad reality of it here. But I'm good with that. And I have at most 2 years of that left. So we'll see how it goes.
That is very admirable. And speaking of which, do you have any thoughts about artificial intelligence at large? Like, do you feel that essentially, like, we are eventually going to come to a time where we will, in fact, be taken over by artificial intelligences, or do you feel that basically that is unlikely, not something to happen to the human race at large? Humans will retain a constant role in this world, maybe I don't know, like just accidentally get eliminated by some super intelligent AI system that essentially wants to clean up the environment and decides that we are the prime polluter. I'm sorry, wait, what?
Well,
No, sorry, go on.
yeah, like my conclusion is that like unless like the world and like the powers of the world act drastically to influence how like AI and super intelligence is being developed right now, um like the world will progress to a stage where like AI gets too strong and we cannot control it, we cannot align it, and then it just kills us all. It is
Mm,
the inevitable outcome with probability one. However, as humans, it doesn't help us too much to think about this, to think about like when it will happen, how it will happen, you know, so we just move on with life, right?
pardon. Why do you say that it will kill us with probability one in the event that alignment does not happen? Would you illustrate how that might be possible?
So this is just my opinion, but ultimately it stems from the fact that like it is very rare that like a more intelligent like species is like controlled by a far less intelligent species. This
Mm-hmm.
has never like happened throughout our like observation of the world.
Mm,
Some people are like very very adamant like it's fine to like just train like AI however we please and nothing will happen. I am not one of those people, and I think
mm,
yeah, it's just like how in chess where when you're playing against a stronger player, you have no idea how they're gonna beat you, right? And the same thing here, like if you do not know what this super intelligence is thinking about, and
mm,
you do not know what its intentions are,
mm,
and yeah, it just becomes a very very huge risk, right? Which the smarter it grows becomes an even bigger risk.
mm,
And like the state of incentives in AI development mean that like unless everyone decides to stop developing AIs all at once under some like omnipotent force, like it will balloon to that stage where we reach a point where we have a super intelligence that we cannot control and decides to just kill us all in a way we don't know how.
I see.
Um
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
yeah,
said
a
indeed
lot
by
of it a
human
lot of
super
it also
intelligence right there. Go on. Sorry.
a lot of it also stems like from the fact that like we only have one try, right? The reasons human are like very good at like developing new technologies is because we have the process of science. We can try something, and if it fails, we try again. And there's this sort of like empirical process that really helps us accelerate development in all sorts of areas. Whereas, with super intelligence, you only have one try at a really powerful super intelligence system. And if this one try fails, everyone dies. So you have to get the first try right. And if you look at our history, humans have never gotten the first try right.
Moon landing.
What? Yeah.
So well, granted, I
Even
mean, like, yeah,
even
so
then, right? It was like in many stages, and like, many things flew and blew up in the air. It wasn't like good fully. So
okay, cool. All right, yeah, definitely I can see how there would essentially be a threat right there in a lot of different ways. It's definitely not something that we can take lightly by any means. All right, thank you for sharing on that. So as we move towards the end of this interview, so perhaps for students who are aspiring to follow a path that's similar to yours, so I guess what advice or insights would you share about perhaps being able to hit on a path similar to that which you have gone on so far?
I think like the most surefire way to find yourself here is to find an academic area where you're like one of the best in the world at your particular age group. I think that's like the most surefire way to get into a school like this. It's to find an academic subdiscipline. It can be any discipline, right? And just prove that like among all the students, high school students competing with you to get into this school, you are near the best. If you can do that, then your spot is saved for you here. And that's
It's
my
like
only advice.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, what's up? Like, go and win, like the international Olympiad of Olympiads. I don't know, like win a medal at like the uh international super intelligence Olympiads or something of that nature. I don't know, IMO, whatever have you right there. Are there other
I don't
ways
know,
to
like
essentially establish
not
that self
so, right?
proof?
Even in math, like I would say that like the IMO community, or like the students here who have did math competitions before, is surprisingly in the minority in the math department.
Right.
Most
Yeah.
math students did not do like these competitions when they were younger.
Mm.
It is a nice thing. It does help, although there is like a lot of toxicity within that community as well. But yeah, a lot of students just they reached out to a professor on some niche math topic that they really liked, and then they got into some program, and then they did like math research and stuff, and they published a paper in the math journal. And like that kind of path works too. um and especially like with CS and like software and like AI and building, like it's a lot easier to like get towards the cutting edge or something. Like I feel like the prerequisites like becoming far and far like fewer, right? Like if you think about what formal knowledge it takes for someone to like really get involved in AI these days, like that's actually not that much, like
Mm.
in terms of like the practical development and building of an AI system. So that could be something you do, right? It's about finding like ways within each field to like reach the top, and
Mm.
yeah, and just spending a lot of time there.
Okay, cool. All right. So then, I guess reflecting on your journey so far, do you feel that there's an experience or something that stands out to you throughout your time at Harvard so far?
Well, I think nothing in particular.
Mm.
It's just that like, yeah, I think towards the end of my first year, I sort of reflected about like how much I've grown
Mm.
across the year. Like at the start of like my first year when I landed here, like I was struggling within like classes at even like starting a proof and like finding an approach. And like the act of like writing a proof itself was very hard in Math 55. Like what words do I use? How do I like formulate this argument in a way that makes sense to
Mm.
other people? And I think by the end of the first year, like my fingers were moving themselves, things flew like a lot more smoothly. And I was just like, wow, like this is the growth I've had throughout this year. And I think that that was like beautiful to me at the time. So
Mm.
yeah, so I guess that moment if I have to choose.
Amazing. Wow. Like from not being able to write proofs towards getting an A within the class, within the semester. Just applause on that. Amazing. Okay, cool. So then I guess a final question for you then. What do you hope, I guess, to be your legacy upon Earth?
Oh, I don't hope for anything right now. Maybe I'm not that far up in Maslow's hierarchy yet.
Mm.
But yeah, I just hope that I can exist in this planet as a happy being, with other happy beings that I care about. That's all I hope for.
Wow, that was a incredibly touching message. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And yeah, so amazing. So, all right, is there anything else that you want to share by any chance or
Not really.
not
Nothing to
really?
pub. So.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for the interview. And here we are.